Thank you very much, Vim. Has it already been 2 years?
Almost, in August.
Oh, my.
22 months.
Oh, my. I'm sure it feels as fresh and new as to you and me as ever, huh? It's great to be back at Portland State University. It's one of the fine academic institutions that I have the privilege to represent. Portland State, Oregon Health Science University, and the new president of Clatsop Community College just said hello in the hallway, Larry Galizio, late of state government, and soon to be president, I believe on July 1, of Clatsop Community College, another institution I have the privilege to work with. We have had, as a congressional office, have had the opportunity to hire several Portland State University graduates. Soon there's an intern in our office who exemplifies that, but I also want to say that it goes the other way also. We have graduates who come back to work at Portland State, and Mary over here, Mary, hold up your hand, is an example of that phenomenon, and we look forward to building this two-way relationship, which is in part what this legislation is about and what Vim has been about, both in Baltimore in his prior posting and here in Portland. He has been in the business of growing coalitions, growing partnerships between academic institutions and the urban environments which these institutions serve. That is a very, very important thing to do. Vim has excelled at that, and Portland State has been working on it for a good long while, but has brought the proper crew together to expand on that. And that is what this Urban Serving University Renaissance Act is all about, to take the Portland State model, if you will, expand on it, strengthen it, and take it nationwide. It will benefit Portland State and the many other academic institutions which are at the vital heart of our national urban centers. While we face many challenges in Oregon and in our nation and around the world, none is more vital, more urgent than the recovery of our economy, restoring economic growth, and getting jobs for everyone who is seeking one. Urban universities serve as the anchors of our nation's city and are at the heart of our economic revival and renewal. These institutions are uniquely positioned to share a broad range of skills and resources, intellectual, human, technological, and social, with the communities which surround them. And my legislation, the Urban University Renaissance Act of the 21st century, will help schools like Portland State accelerate and expand urban renewal by providing them with the resources and support needed to lead communities, rebuild neighborhoods, and attract businesses and jobs to the urban centers of our American cities. When we involve urban universities in a more systematic way in our communities, we can amplify the very good work that they already do. Urban universities are already the innovators and economic drivers in their own right. They invest collectively more than $6 billion in the surrounding communities. My bill will help these schools as they go beyond educating students to become leaders in their chosen fields. Urban universities do extraordinary work off campus by engaging with city governments, social service organizations, schools, and other pillars of our urban centers. They are the partners that these organizations have in raising the quality of life for us all. My bill recognizes this multifaceted role and seeks to strengthen the infrastructure, governance, and resources of these vital universities so that they can better meet the needs of our communities in areas such as K-12 education, healthcare, and innovation, among other things. For example, one program in my legislation would help more teachers learn the specific skills needed to successfully teach in urban environments. And this would ultimately help our cities have more and better qualified teachers and educators. The legislation also encourages urban universities to work alongside mayors, superintendents, and business leaders to ensure that high school graduation requirements are properly aligned with college and workforce expectations. The bill supports multiple grant programs that will fund urban university research, notably including research on environmental issues in low-income neighborhoods. We in Portland are not strangers to the challenges of ecological equity between the different neighborhoods in our community. Much of the work will be conducted in partnership with community-based organizations and increase the connection between academic exploration and on-the-ground community needs and results. A further provision would help urban universities provide assistance to local nonprofits which are committed to community development or affordable housing and other such urban needs. Today, we're also strengthening innovation in our cities. Just about all the economists agree that 60% or more of American economic growth since World War II is attributable to innovation. Not just more labor, not just more material, but changing the way that labor and material are combined to produce new products, new services, and most importantly, the high-wage, middle-class jobs that supports the American way of life. Innovation is the heart of the American way, as well as of the American economy, and providing more resources for innovation in the core of our cities is a vital need. And finally, we aim to revitalize the core of our urban universities by establishing a program in the Higher Education Act to support the beneficial work that they do in our cities. And altogether, collectively, these provisions are meant to provide a pathway to the future, a roadmap of how urban universities can help strengthen our communities while becoming stronger themselves. It has been a pleasure, a great pleasure to work with them, to work with Portland State and a consortium of urban universities around the country to develop this legislation, and we look forward to developing this comprehensive vision for expanding, improving, and acting upon the needs of our urban centers. Legislation typically, it can pass as one whole. Much more likely, it is added to a bigger piece of legislation, and we will be doing big pieces of higher education in the coming years and in the next congressional cycle. And also, frequently, the many provisions that are in a big bill like this will get picked up in pieces of legislation as they come across through my committee assignment on the Education and Labor Committee, and as these bills approach the House floor. What we hope is that in the coming years, urban areas will continue to be a stable source of high-wage jobs, to provide long-term economic growth, as well as the essential services that Americans count on. And we do better by starting on this process today and build the leadership for prosperity, innovation, and education. And I want to thank Viv and all the other leaders at Portland State for working with me to develop this legislation. We look forward to a strong partnership to pushing this legislation in the Congress. It is my intention to introduce the legislation tomorrow, and we have drawn to a close substantially, but not completely, the process of drafting this legislation, and now we begin the process of pushing it through the Congress. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions later, and turn the microphone back to Vic.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman, and thank you for working with us during this past year to as we crafted and refined the various ideas, as you may imagine, there are a lot of different ideas floating around about how universities can work better with their cities. And one thing that is so satisfying about this is, you know, the various pieces of the land grant legislation that have, over the last 120 years, enabled institutions like Oregon State University here in Oregon to work so wonderfully and strongly with many communities throughout the state. Over the last 40 years, urban universities have tried to find a similar kind of vehicle to allow them to work with their communities, the urban communities, and this is a piece of legislation that addresses a variety of areas through which we would be able to do that, even though we know that there will be many roadblocks still to overcome between now and actually getting passage of these. The Coalition of Urban Serving Universities that the Congressman referred to is an organization of 45 public urban research universities, and I sit on the executive committee of that coalition. And all of those institutions, it includes several of the State University of New York urban campuses, all of the California State campuses, places like my former employer, the University of Illinois at Chicago, many others that are really anchor institutions in their cities. Most of those institutions primarily serve people from their metropolitan region. Together, these 45 universities prepare more than 20% of all teachers in the country, so they're very important on the education side. They are leaders in community engagement and outreach, and they're economic drivers. 14 of the urban serving universities have established research parks. 18 have formal mechanisms for linking university research capacity and expertise to the region's economic needs. So PSU would benefit from these programs. I wanted to give you just one example of how a federal program can have such long-lasting effects. As you may know, back in the early 90s, 1996, we received something called the Community Outreach Partnership Center Program grant to establish a business incubator in North Portland that was operated by the Oregon Association of Minority Entrepreneurs. It was just a one-time grant at that time. But the incubator that was established, Cascade Plaza, is still operating now, 14 years later, and that grant was also instrumental in starting our School of Businesses, I think I saw Scott here, the Business Outreach Program, which has a 16-year history of assisting low to moderate income, minority and women-owned small business owners and micro-entrepreneurs in inner North and Northeast Portland, while giving our students an opportunity to, of course, learn about business by bringing it into practice. The Business Outreach Program has supported over 420 companies since '94, placed 1,300 students as consultants, has provided over $1 million of student consulting services, and have created, just during the last 4 years, over 146 jobs. That is just an example of what can be done with a one-time federal grant. Just think about what can happen when it becomes an ongoing support in many more areas. You all know that that work that I just alluded to is very much part of what we do throughout the institution. Our total economic impact is about $1.2 billion on the region through our multiplier effect. That's because we are an employer, a purchaser, we of course train the workforce, we develop real estate, we provide expert advice, we promote businesses, and we partner with many not-for-profits and educational organizations. Our students completed last year more than 230 community-based research projects, contributing about 1.5 million volunteer hours annually, which is worth about $25 million. And the special thing about Portland State in my mind is that these are not things that we do as volunteers, sort of as do-gooders, but they're an integral part of our curriculum. This legislation would help more universities do more activities like this in the area of working with K through 12 schools, working with health agencies, working with community organizations, working with public organizations, working on issues of sustainability, education, innovation, and economic development. So it's because of all these things that promoting this, but as part of a nationwide coalition, is such an important opportunity for us. And again, I want to thank the Congressman and his wonderful staff, both here and in Washington, who have spent so many hours working to actually turn, as I said, these ideas into legislation. And I want to introduce Shyla Martin, the director of our Institute for Metropolitan Studies, who will give a few more examples of the kind of work that this legislation would enable and further promote. Shyla.
Thank you, President Vivell, and I want to join President Vivell in thanking Congressman Wu for leadership in this legislation. And I just want to share a few thoughts about why this legislation will help the work of the Institute of Portland Metropolitan Studies and other centers and institutes across PSU to have a sort of a greater positive impact in our community. The Institute of Portland Metropolitan Studies is only one of a number of centers and institutes across this campus that do research and service and play a very important role in making this a better place to live. As President Vivell mentioned, PSU's faculty, staff, and students partner with organizations across the entire metropolitan area to build a more vibrant economy, a more sustainable environment, and a more just society. IMS plays three critical roles in this region. First, we work in partnership with the Population Research Center, our sister institution, to gather and distribute and interpret important data about trends that are affecting our metropolitan region. And these are trends that our leaders really need to understand in order to be able to make important decisions. Second, we conduct in-depth policy research on the issues that our leaders are telling us are the things that they need to know more about. And finally, we act as a convener, a neutral convener, to bring regional leaders and citizens together to discuss these important issues. Just in the past few months, we have developed and interpreted information about issues as important as housing foreclosures, poverty and self-sufficiency, and the changing demographics of our region and how that's going to affect our schools and public services in the decades to come. We believe that an open and honest dialogue about these trends is essential to making our region better. And that's why we're currently partnering with Metro and the cities and counties in our region and nonprofit organizations on a project called the Greater Portland-Vancouver Regional Indicators Project. In partnership with all of these entities, we're going to convene a number of leaders, and across the region, we're going to identify the important outcomes that our citizens and leaders think are most important. What is it that we want to accomplish, and how are we going to measure whether we're moving towards those goals? Our role then will be to gather that information, package it, and distribute it as a community report card so that we can find out whether or not the strategies that we're using are accomplishing the goals that we're trying to meet. So how will this legislation help us to be more effective in this important work? First, it will assist PSU and other urban universities in making a long-term institutional commitment to programs like the IMS and the Population Research Center. It'll encourage urban universities to work with community partners on problems that really matter to our community. For example, it'll help us, as Congressman Wu mentioned, it'll help us develop technologies, but not just any technology, but the technologies that are most important to the long-term profitability of the companies that are important to this region. It'll help us solve problems that are facing growing metropolitan areas like sustainable transportation, affordable housing, and creating communities that are healthy and safe for all of our residents. It'll help us address environmental issues that we face in a lot of metropolitan regions. We think about, in the West, the issues of water shortages. We think about the importance of sustainable land use and how global climate change is going to affect us locally. And as President Vivell mentioned, this legislation will also encourage our urban universities to become more engaged in the improvement of our cradle to career education system. Most importantly, this legislation is going to encourage us to sustain a dialogue, a long-term dialogue with leaders and citizens to make sure that our efforts are continuing to align with what our community really needs. And it'll help us to leverage federal resources with the resources that we currently gather from state and local and university resources, and help us make sure that all of those resources are being used towards the same ends. For IMS, that means that we'll be able to do that our work will be even more relevant, that it'll be directly relevant and immediately useful in our region. So again, I'd like to join President Vivell in thanking Congressman Wu for sponsoring this legislation and for leading the charge towards making our universities better partners with the federal government.
Thank you, Shyla. There's now time for some questions or comments from anybody. Yes, please. And could you please identify yourself?
Andy Egerton, Business Journal. Congressman, how much money are you talking about here? For how much of an ask are you making?
This is the subject of some discussion. The estimates of cost are significant but very, very worthwhile. In the current political environment where folks have pretty much pulled in their horns, the language we have chosen to use, because I think passage is the most important thing, the language we have chosen to use is subject to appropriation.
Do you have like a range?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
It has a lot of zeros, and it's subject to negotiation about how many zeros we put in at any given point. Let me just point out that investments in education, and especially investments in higher education and in research, have the biggest multiplier effect of any governmental activity whatsoever. And if we are going to recover our economy and build it in a sustainable way, where we create good wage, high wage jobs for the middle class for a long period of time, rather than have this bubble-oriented growth, we are going to have to make the proper investments in education, K through 12, but especially in higher education, where it can come back and build innovation in our society. I cited previously that 60% or more of American economic growth since World War II has been due to innovation. And Professor Solow, am I saying that right? S-O-L-O-W, got a Nobel Prize for showing that between the late 19th century and mid-century, 20th century, that 90% of American economic growth was because of innovation. So we are going to get a lot of bang for the buck for any dollar spent. And then can I go on just for a second? It's not just the Institute of Metropolitan Studies, and it's not just the incubator, President Vivell, that you cited in North Portland. This is about the future. And one of the really exciting projects that we are undertaking is what I call the Hub Lab, what others call ERIC, and what the Secretary of Energy views as the energy salvation of the United States going forward. He has proposed 8 regional applied research laboratories. There are 3 which have been put out for proposal thus far. And Portland State and a consortium of other organizations doing research such as Oregon State, doing training such as Portland Community College, doing power generation such as BPA, and delivering it such as PGE, have come together to apply for these funds, which are substantial. It's about $129 million over a 5-year period. So, we're talking about $27 million a year. What does it do? What it does is not only do the applied research, and in this instance, the Hub Lab that we've applied for is focused on energy efficiency in buildings, because the other proposals go through utilities big companies, whereas when you focus on energy efficiency in buildings, that gives you the entrepreneurial opportunity for firms like Girdling Edlin, for firms like ZGF, for building contractors, for engineering firms. And you have an opportunity for a vibrant small business community. So one part is applied research, but another vital part is small business development, the dissemination of that technology in an economy. The goal is to not only do the research, and Department of Energy wants to have an economic effect and a training effect on the workforce right away. And this is something that could not happen without an urban university like Portland State. Because Oregon State, which is part of the coalition, is a vital part of ag extension, the efforts of not just the last century, but continuing today to get better agricultural technology into our farming community. And what we're trying to do today through manufacturing extension and through small business development centers is to get the research done at places like Portland State and to get that technology into our communities very rapidly so that it can result in innovation, in the development of technologies and methods, in the development of high-wage middle-class jobs. What that means on the ground is that we will have more energy-efficient buildings in the Pacific Northwest and around the country. We will depend less on sources of energy from unstable foreign governments, and we will be able to develop those jobs to build that in. I was just at the Community Action Team, the CAT team in St. Helens, and they're creating 15 or 20 jobs in weatherization. This is funded from similar things from the Recovery Act. These hub labs are funded from there, and the Community Action Team in St. Helens is funded from the same place. And weatherizing houses, better energy efficiency, jobs, less dependence on foreign oil, and that is the overarching goal of what they're doing and also what Portland State will be helping with in this hub lab concept. I'm very, very pleased about that. I'm very proud of that. I've been with Vin pushing in this arena for almost the entire time that he's been here, and we have a very aggressive application, and it's going to be a very competitive environment, but it's urban serving institutions like PSU that make applications like that possible. Sorry to go on so long. That's not the topic here, but it's an example of what can be done in the future.
Other questions?
And I'm sorry to do this, but this will have to be the last question for Congressman Wu.
Well, I think
I've worn you down.
I want to thank you all for coming today.